To say this time that the views expressed here are those of myself and do not necessarily reflect the views or Kazoo staff and board of directors. This is Mae Brussell, 3753082. I hope everything goes well tonight so that you can call in. I can hear your calls and see what's going on. We've had a little trouble and we're trying to check it and see if these calls come through. So we'll give it a chance, 3753082. And if not, I'll share some more material with you. I don't see a light on, so I'm beginning to wonder. But we'll keep, if the call isn't in the first 2 minutes, I don't know if the call's going to come through because it seems to me that it lights up right away. But we'll give it a little bit of time here and see what happens. I'll announce again that John Judge is going to be at the Unitarian Church up in Santa Cruz, 11 to 12:15 a.m. Did I say Santa Cruz before? It is. Aptos, rather. It's off of Freedom Boulevard and 6401 Freedom Boulevard, Sunday, December the 6th. And exit on Freedom and go 1 mile to McDonald and Freedom. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, May. I just wanted to test your line for you. So apparently it's working.
It's a little shaky. Can you hear it okay?
I can hear you over the telephone.
You can hear it? You're listening on the radio?
You want me to check?
Yeah, listen to the radio. It's sounding a little bit shaky, but they were having trouble with the studio with the lines. The engineer was here the week before. Just check it and see if it's on the air.
Turn up the volume on the radio.
What?
Let me turn up the volume on the radio.
Okay. See if you can hear it on the radio. The telephone's coming in. Let's see if you can hear the radio. Well, okay.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I coming over the radio?
Yeah. I suppose you're not telling me. I'm asking you.
I don't hear my voice on the radio.
Huh?
I do not hear my voice.
You don't hear your voice on the radio.
No.
Well, hang up and let somebody else see if they hear their voice.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay. Very soft. Okay, they did tell me this studio was fixed over, and we were in the other studio for a while, and I was told that there were some adjustments to be made. Let's see. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I can hear myself pretty well on the radio. It's sort of a half-quavering thing, but...
It's quavering, but it's there.
It's quavering, but it's there. It's better than it was last week.
There's a little life.
Yeah.
It's
what,
like...
What do you think about Harold Washington?
Oh, yes, I want to do more on that. There's a very good book that I've quoted many times called Inspection for Disarmament.
Uh-huh.
And there's a chapter in there by Seymour Melman. He was a professor at the university in Germany who was removed from the teaching there very early. He got out alive and came to this country. And he was one of the first person, he actually was the person that clued me on to the murder of 400 people in Germany before Hitler came to power.
Right.
By the Freikorps and the power. The Freikorps were part of the military establishment but looks separate, like the Church of Set is part of Vietnam but looks like it's individual with its tax deduction.
Uh-huh.
And the people can affect change, like the black people are saying in Chicago. He's the only person that brought them hope, the articles this week. And if you look at people like Whitney Young, the black leader who was in Nigeria who drowned, had a heart attack in the water there at the ocean edge, and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and go on, so many black leaders, black civil rights, and leaders, people of leadership position. I believe that the technology is there. Frank Churchill described it in one of his writings and on the air of just simply going down the aisle of an airplane and putting a substance on your clothing. You know, you touch somebody's shoulder, and 3 days later they die of a massive heart attack, and there's not a trace at the autopsy. So it didn't matter whether he sat at his desk or whether he died in his sleep.
Sure.
If somebody wanted him to die without any trace, and it's just it's impossible that all these young people, young and serving at the height of their career,
Right.
are being offed. I don't for a minute think it wasn't anything but a murder. And I thought for lifetime pre-Christmas, I thought I'd go into some of those murders, leave Satan and go into those for our lifetime. Jingle bells, okay?
Right. It seems like it was, he was a very vicious second campaign, and he'd just gotten in for another long term.
And it was a vicious campaign, and I had seen an article that I put away just last week, a day before he died, on plans. There were plans to kill him, of course, and he was trying to break up those power groups in Chicago, which are almost impossible, and these people never get a fair shake.
Yeah.
I think if Jesse Jackson, and this is an if and he isn't, so he won't, he were half a man, he would step right in and take over the position to show that a black man was killed, and I'm going to fill those shoes. It's my hometown.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you. I saw Martin Luther King killed. I was on the balcony, and this Vernon Jordan was shot. He almost died, but he didn't. But he was shot by that Joseph Franklin, the racist, who's in jail for murders. And so I think that Washington should. You can't examine it because there's no way to do an autopsy when the chemical is made that you can't have it, Sure. Now, I got a note here that it's still soft, and last week, there was a clicking on the board, okay?
Yeah.
And when I went down, last week I didn't get calls, it was the week before.
Right.
The engineer said, I saw him, he was coming into work in the studio when it closed down at 12. How did everything go? And I said, well, thanks a lot. His ticking was in my ear.
Right.
And he said, oh, yeah, I came to fix that. We'll work on it. But nobody left a note. May, you're going to hear a clicking.
I can still hear the clicking through the phone.
The clicking is there. It'll have to be adjusted. The voice is soft. But we're here. It's sort of like Peter Pan with Tinkerbell fading out, and everyone should clap their hands, and
Sure.
Tinkerbell survived.
One last thing, I'd like to take this on the air. The other Aquino, there's this Aquino, but then there's Benigno Aquino. So at one point you were mentioning, I'm sure you've talked about this more in the past, but I'd be interested to hear a little thumbnail sketch. You mentioned that he was Ed Lansdale's right-hand man
in the CIA, exactly.
With mind control.
That's right. Now, I didn't use the word mind control. He worked in Southeast Asia with the Phoenix program, with our special forces, and Benigno Aquino was a CIA agent. Now, this Michael Aquino says that his mother, or at least the news said she was engaged to a Waffen SS. He could have just been the seed of one of those Liebersborn. He's the right age.
Right.
You look at his hair, the temples are white, he's just turning like 40s. And he just is an absolutely face. He almost looked like Secord's brother, Richard Secord, who was in Southeast Asia,
Right.
And the thing is that they planted those seeds and gladly gave the baby to the Fuhrer. Now, who she married an Aquino afterwards, and I haven't the faintest idea who he is.
Yeah.
Or if they're related. This Michael Aquino looks like the real devil. He doesn't look Filipino.
Yeah.
But the name, I don't know anything about the circumstances of being related. Right now, I wouldn't think, yes, that they're related.
Sure.
Because one is Filipino, the other isn't.
Right.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Now, we'll hang in there with your soft voice, still quiet voice here, and we'll see how the calls go. 375-3082. If you had a call last week and you couldn't get on, now's your chance to call and get on the air and tell me what you're thinking about. There was another article in the San Francisco Examiner this week saying witches in military ask for rights. Now, being a witch, and Michael Aquino's wife is a witch, is one thing. Worshipping Satan and going to the castle of Heinrich Himmler is something else. Hello, you're on the air. Hello? Oh, they hung up. They were on, they're off. Try again. This article comes out of West Germany, and there are branches of the nursery schools in military that are having these satanic rites for children, military in Germany. Hello?
Hello, May.
Yes.
Do you think all the phone calls to you are tapped?
I don't know the technology. I'm not in the phone business. I don't know. There's certainly the capability to do anything they want, and the station has talk shows that don't have these problems, and I'm using the same board and the same material.
How many people do you think are being monitored by the CIA?
How many people are being monitored? Now, that's a silly question. How would I know?
I don't know.
Because, you see, you're talking about the CIA, right?
Right.
Well, there's a Defense Intelligence Agency that Aquino worked for. There's the National Security Agency. That's their budget is 10 times larger, the DIA, than the CIA. There's the National Security Council with their secret team, that cabal inside. There's Air Force Intelligence, okay? There is the Army Intelligence.
What?
There is the Office of Navy Intelligence, ONI. Okay, so you take away the CIA, you've got 6 branches that are budgeted 10, 20 times larger than the CIA just for this kind of work. People think CIA is the only agency going. Yeah.
Well, okay.
That's why, see, when Richard Secord retired from Air Force in 1983, he left the Pentagon and he retired, quotes, but then he starts working for the secret team where he gets no salary and he's not any payroll, but he's working outside the National Security Council, making the deposits, buying the planes, buying the boats, and instead of being on the payroll, he ends up with $6 million.
Thank you, Mae.
Okay. Bye-bye. Yeah, I think for years I've tried to bring out the difference between the agencies, not the difference, but the way they work. Trading agents, you can retire, like Thomas Kleins and Theodore Shackley from the CIA, and then they end up showing up with the National Security Council. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Mae Brussell.
Hi.
Hi, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
If you could maybe speak about NutraSweet,
NutraSweet, okay.
and also companies and their political ties. If you know of a good book that I can research companies and what they're tied to.
Okay. One of the best companies is the Sovereign State of ITT. The Sovereign State. That goes into the Nazi connections of ITT. Mr. Benz was working for Adolf Hitler while he was working for the United States. A lot of the companies are blind because they're not on the stock market. They aren't open companies, like the Howard Hughes organization was a privately owned corporation. ITT Bechtel is an upfront corporation that does spying and intelligence work. IG Farben, of course, was the biggest and greatest out of Germany with their branches in the United States, and they have Bayer Aspirin and Hoffman LaRoche laboratories that made 34 million LSD for the great enlightened Americans that turned into zombies. And there are quite a few companies. I can bring in a list. Also use aircraft.
You know of a book, though?
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you what's the best book. One of the best books is called Spooks by Jim Hogan. And that goes into many of the corporations, the major corporations that are used for spying and how the networks are set up, Lockheed and the big companies. It comes in paperback, and it's a classic.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about it. And if you could talk about NutraSweet, and I'll take it all.
Off the air, okay.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay, now I must bring in for you the congressional hearings where NutraSweet came up just this last year. Reagan wanted to increase the the germ warfare and the weapons and use DNA and scientific methods of germ warfare because of the new technology. A gentleman from the Pentagon said, with this advanced technology, we should update the kind of weapons we have. And he listed a DNA and genetic engineering and germ disease and NutraSweet. And NutraSweet, I have to send to the congressional committees for a copy of the hearing. I say that all the time, but maybe this week I'll really do it. And I've read many articles about people whose minds go hazy. And I once saw an article, which is among my collection of stuff that I would like to sort out. But I do have articles on NutraSweet. It seems there's an aspartame, I believe it. Aspartame is the name, an ingredient in there. And your memory is a collection of nerves that hold together in a certain pattern that connect from one to the other, just like a telephone line or communication. And from what I understand, NutraSweet breaks up the nerves and interrupts the memory. If you know a lot of young people, not old people, and I believe that Alzheimer's is another biological time bomb, but not NutraSweet, that people are saying, I don't remember this, or I saw a movie, I can't remember the name, or I met so-and-so, do you remember so-and-so? Oh, I can't remember her name. There are more young people not remembering things now, and they are consuming, with this staying thin fad, the diet colas, the diet Pepsis, the diet drinks, the diet chocolate drinks, the chewing gum, they don't want to add an extra pound, and these things are padded with NutraSweet. And NutraSweet was just pushed in. The head of the company, it was put together by not Dow, but Searle and Company, and the head of that was a former CIA director. I'll bring in some stuff. I'll make a note and try to bring in some more on NutraSweet because it was pushed. Saccharin was taken off the shelves, and I think it would take 90,000 pounds to make a rat half cancerous out of saccharin. And there are warnings on buildings such as Long's drugstore that say, be careful, saccharin it can cause cancer, and not a word about NutraSweet. You may not die from it, but you may not even have a memory. So that's the thing about NutraSweet. I'll bring in some more material next week. 3753082. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Mae. Love your work.
Oh, thank you.
Was that Buckley that interviewed the Republican candidates, hopefuls?
Yes, William Buckley.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that reminds me that might have that stare.
Well, he is a member of the Order of the Death's Head.
He is. So
yes, he is a member of the Order of the Bones, the Skull and Bones. It's called the Bones at Yale. Buckley is a member of the Bones. Yes.
That's
dug up a grave to get initiated into it. They have rituals of death. 15 people are selected every year. It's one of the most secret societies, and those people run and control our government agencies, news media, and so forth, and corporations.
I had a feeling that he was closely affiliated with that.
Yeah, and he was the man who formed, if you can call him a man, he formed Young Americans for Freedom in 1960 and put Ronald Reagan on the board.
Yeah.
This is from Skull and Bones, and I understand his sister was a roommate of Nancy Reagan at Smith College.
Jeez, that's amazing.
Yeah, he has that look.
Does it look like the media's kind of playing Carlucci for the moderate?
The media...
I'll take that answer off.
Okay, thanks. The media has swallowed Frank Carlucci. Oh, he's wonderful as National Security Advisor. We knew him as a deputy director of the CIA. We knew him as deputy director of the Defense. They found no conflict in the fact that he worked with Richard Secor and Theodore Shackley and Eric von Marbach and people who had taken from the government, literally stolen a cost overrun of about $6 million out of a company called Eatsco. Carlucci, there's certain people that just pass all examination without any reason at all. We are supposed to be looking at a secret team, and he is part of the secret team. That's what makes this so scary, is that this General Powell was part of the National Security Council that was there when Oliver North was shredding papers. He was helping him. He became National Security Director, and Frank Carlucci, who was National Security Director from January of 87, becomes the Secretary of Defense. So, and William Webster, who's his agent, Mr. Buck Oliver, worked at NSC with Ollie North under the terrorism cloak, was part of the Iran-Contra story, became CIA director. So right now in Washington, we have the very people who are the heart and guts of this secret team. And I don't believe there's much difference between where I'm going to trace Ollie North to Michael Aquino, and then I want to send a package of information to the Armed Services Committee, but I'll wait till after Christmas. I don't think they'll be able to handle it. They'll have their Christmas recess and get into that. 3753082, this is Mae Brussell. You can get on the line. You didn't get it last week. I'll start this story out of Germany, the one about witches in the military. Witches in the military are banding together, called a pagan fellowship, to explain their beliefs and dog tag recognition. On their dog tag, it will say pagan. Military witches in Europe want to take care of their problem, of their recognition, through the proper channels. I guess they don't want any crosses or anything on their graves when the next war starts. They are hoping to change the image they feel burdened with and become more widely accepted by, in the open, calling themselves the Pagan Fellowship. The paper said there were an unknown number of Wiccan religious followers in the U.S. forces in Europe. Wiccans believe in multiple deities as well as the oneness of all nature, Stars and Stripes reported. Well, there's quite a difference between oneness with all nature and the Waffen-SS that Aquino is sympathetic to, that believes that there's only one way to rule the world and that the Aryans are the only ones that are entitled to live, and that it is your sacrifice to suffer while you kill the others who are in your way, stomping on them and smashing them open. The newspaper interviewed a founder of the Pagan Fellowship, Farwinder, Military Pagan Fellowship, who was a witch, Sergeant Laurie Johnson. He's a part of the 601st Tactical Control Wing at the Air Force Base in West Germany, and he wants the pagans to be in the military and be identified and be left alone. Hello, you're on the air. Hello?
Hi.
Yeah.
May, I happen to work for Hoffman LaRoche, and I would like to hear more about your reference to them manufacturing LSD.
Okay.
And I'll take that off the air.
Okay.
Thanks.
You work for Hoffman LaRoche. Okay. Now, when I speak, I must clarify. When I say the FBI, the CIA, the San Francisco police, I'm talking about particular people or particular companies where these activities have been identified in articles or books that I have. I'll bring next week, I'll make a note on acid dreams, and also on NutraSweet. There's a new book out called Acid Dreams. A fellow by the name of Lee wrote it, L-E-E. He has a co-partner, but I just know him by that name. He works with Kevin Coogan in New York, and they did work on terrorism, Nazi fascist terrorism in Europe. So I know Lee wrote the book Acid Dreams, and he tells about the head of there's Hoffman himself at University of California at Santa Cruz, and he was treated like a hero. And this book tells about the control experiments and the use of acid, and it gets into the more sinister government uses of mind control through these drugs. And of course, the children at the Presidio were given injections and drugs. But Hoffman LaRoche was owned or is owned by I.G. Farben, and I.G. Farben is the company that made Zyklon B for Heinrich Himmler. They were the persons who distributed Zyklon B for gas extermination, where you could kill a minimum of 10,000 a day to put into the ovens. And the scientist for that, Zyklon B, was Otto Ambrose, who was brought to the United States after the war by J. Peter Grace, a man who was appointed to Reagan's cabinet position of cutting the costs in this country. Instead of being hung at Nuremberg for being the chemist to make Zyklon B, he was rewarded by being employed by the United States shortly afterwards. That's through Hoffman LaRoche, and that's owned by I.G. Farben. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, May, do you have any idea as to what kind of negotiations went behind closed doors on the U.S.-Cuba agreement on returning the Mariel prisoners?
The prisoners.
As far as my understanding was that there was no more negotiations between the Cuban and U.S. government because of the Radio Marti.
Well,
and all of the sudden we're having this thing turn around and there's a new immigration agreement.
Well, I don't know what the outcome as of today is. I know that they wanted to, Cuba said they would take back all of the people, but some of them already had papers ready to let them stay in the United States. They have wives and children in the United States, and they don't want to go back totally. And we've kept them in there, this number of people, for 7 years instead of processing them properly. And I don't know what the final agreement was. The one good sign of the times, which is so different than Edwin Meese and Reagan years ago with the San Quentin Six or the Attica shooting that took place the same summer, they at least didn't storm the place with the guards and kill everyone on sight. That's what they used to do in the 60s and 70s. That reign of terror has at least slowed down, thank goodness. But as of today, what was the last you heard about it today?
Well, I was just surprised because there was no Reagan administration talks with the Cuban government at all. And all of a sudden, with no warning, there's an agreement reached, and they're gonna start taking back some of the Mariel people.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anything today, but it just took me by surprise that something must have been some negotiation must have been going on. And now it just.
Well, it rained last night, and my Monterey Herald was thrown into the mud, and then it was too late. I discovered to get another one. I'll have to buy one out in front of, they sell them here on Lighthouse. I'll get one when I leave here. But I had the San Francisco Chronicle, and I didn't see any definitive description of how they resolved the problem since Sunday. So I don't know. If somebody knows, call in and tell us, because some of them want to stay here, and they wanted their records gone over one by one to see the individual merits of whether they stay here, and some don't want to go back. So I'm not sure how that's resolved as of today.
Well, I wonder if the U.S. government is going to shut off Radio Marti, and that way the Cuban government decided to allow some of these people back into Cuba.
Well, the way I heard it, the Castro said he would take them back and didn't even mention Radio Marti as being the condition.
Oh, okay.
I didn't hear that had to be shut down.
Well, it was a whole new immigration agreement where they're going to allow people to visit their relatives and back and forth and so on.
Uh-huh.
And then I just don't know. I don't know anything about that other than it caught me by surprise.
Well, all I know is that Castro said he would take them with no punishment. If they came back, they would be free. But I didn't realize, I hadn't at least seen, that the Radio Marti was involved in his decision, to let them all come back. It seems to me after 7 years in American prison, you'd almost want to go back to Cuba and see what it's like. They certainly weren't treated right here. I don't know. They'd rather be here or dead than there. And if he's not going to charge them with anything, I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe they just don't trust the terms, but they got here, and I certainly think, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Okay. That's a hard one to know which way this is going to go, but to his credit, and I don't give old Reagan and Meese much credit for anything, at least they didn't have a shootout. Maybe they were letting him, instigating this thing to keep the news off about the Iran-Contra report. Everything seems to bunch together whenever Reagan's going to be exposed. And I understand he was furious about the report. Remember the first day when Richard Secord testified and Gary Hart's story with Donna Rice came and kept all the news. And then by the time there was another witness, McFarland, then he came on, and then there was the PTL and Tammy and Falwell taking all the news and media comfort discussions, and then there was the shooting in the Gulf and the Gulf War, and there were so many diversionaries about the Iran-Contra events that were just absolutely saturating morning, noon, and night the news. And then when the Iran-Contra report came out that same week, begins this Cuban situation in the prison, and I don't know whether the timing is coincidental or not, but it seems that Reagan has a very good way to cover himself with news he doesn't like by filling it, and maybe, of course, a lot of agents provocateurs in prisons that could instigate all kinds of incidences. Louis Tackwood, who worked for the Los Angeles Police Department, used to be put in a prison uniform and put in a cell and meet and set up certain people to fight each other so they'd have an excuse to keep them in there for life instead of ever a chance of parole. And people the LAPD didn't like, or the powers that be. And so it's hard to know if these are legitimate beefs that came just at this time, or whether somebody had the idea to set it and instigate they were legitimate problems, but to just set them off at this particular time. I always have watched Reagan's timing when he was governor and after the events that take place that seem to move in his favor by obscuring a lot of other events. Now, it's 375-3082. I can share with you some more material. Nice. I will take a call, and maybe I'll get on to some of those. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, Mae?
Yeah.
Yeah. On this Iran scandal, apparently there's a Swedish Iran gate and a Italian Iran gate. Hasn't the Swedish arms industry, haven't they been connected with the Nazi Germans since the 30s? I mean, they had the Germans building Junker bombers. And,
yeah, that's right. The Bofar company now that's involved is the Nobel company, the dynamite people. And the Axel Wenner-Gren was a Swedish man who controlled most of the arms for Adolf Hitler and supplied Hitler. Through that time period, and Axel Wenner-Gren was very close to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor when they left the continent of Europe and lived down the Bahamas. He would come down and visit them, and he had locations in South America. He was big into archaeological explorations, which eventually did in third world people. And he made his money off the Electrolux vacuum and the armaments industry. So Sweden was always involved in these heavy armament deals, yes.
Yeah, well, I read a magazine. It was an aviation magazine about 50 years of Saab aircraft, and essentially they got their start from this. Well, the Germans came in with the Junkers project, and they essentially ripped them off. I mean, they ended up with nothing. I mean, for a lot of money, but during the height of World War II, it said like during after the U.S. embargoed fighter planes to them in '41. It says they were getting aircraft engines and aircraft from Fiat and from the Italian arms producers. So like 1941, 42, they load up a boat of aircraft engines and ship them off to Sweden. I mean, you know, it's and of course same things continuing today. I mean, they have a liberal facade, but I mean, when you look at these rich families that really control the industries and the companies. It sure seems that they're the same old 1930s fascists. I mean, when you see what they do on the international scene, I mean, supplying arms to the Somoza and places like that.
Or giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Henry Kissinger while he's bombing Cambodia.
Exactly. well, nice to talk to you. I normally hear your tapes rebroadcast over in the Bay Area, and I just happened to be over here and
good
on the radio.
Oh, good. You were, by any chance, the one who sent me an article in the Air Force about Carlucci
No,
advertising?
I usually send stuff to Dave Emery and Nip Tuck.
Well, send a copy, whatever you send, make 2 copies. But thanks a lot for calling.
All right, well, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Did you hear that? I was reading a magazine, Trade a Plane, and this German Air Force Luftwaffe General Galland.
Yes.
Like he holds these seminars. I mean, I went.
Oops. Oh, you got cut off.
Yeah, that's just the money. Yeah, okay. He holds these seminars with all these U.S. Air Force people, and he talks about Air Force military tactics and things like that. And he has 2 other German Air Force higher-ups in the Luftwaffe there, and then they have like these uniformed Navy and Air Force personnel attend these seminars. He holds them in Virginia and down in the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
So I'll send you some stuff on that next time he holds one, because he holds them all the time.
Well, before he held them, the Hans Ulrich Rudel, who was head of the Luftwaffe, was invited the United States to speak at Rockwell Corporation in Virginia, I believe, and he was the pilot who, with Hannah Rausch, the lady pilot, Hitler's 2 favorite pilots, were flying Hitler and Martin Bormann's belongings down to South America, to Argentina, for 2 whole years before the war was over, and they were with Hitler up to the moment, supposedly before he died, but there was a lot of information, and I believe he was flown out by them. And Hans Ulrich Rudel's name, of course, was part of the Joseph Mengele story and operation down in South America, and he was invited to the United States. There's a member of the Luftwaffe, Eugene Wigner, W-I-G-N-E-R, who is on the board of Western Goals with John Singlaub. He was a pilot of the Luftwaffe. They have offices in Germany, and he's part of the Luftwaffe.
Well, he passed away.
No, not Wigner. There's another name. I'll think of his name. Who's a member of the Luftwaffe. And the one who's on the Luftwaffe is still alive, and he and Oliver North's father-in-law, Betsy North's father, is on.
I forget his name.
I'll think of one second.
Yeah.
His too much NutraSweet. his Betsy North's father is on the board of Western Goals.
Yeah, well, that one guy, he passed away, and then Galland sort of takes over his seminars.
Hans Ulrich Rudel passed away. Yes, that's right.
And then this Galland, I mean, they got his picture. I mean, he's in his uniform with a little mustache and his riding crop. I mean, it's interesting how I mean, I wish, what's a good book for Christmas to get like a high school student about the collusion between U.S. industries and people like J. Edgar Hoover and Himmler, and what's a good book?
Well, I think one of the best books, somebody asked about ITT, either or both, if you go to a used bookstore, The Crime and Punishment of I.G. Farben by a Mr. Borkin, who died just the week that came out, an expert on I.G. Farben, The Crime and Punishment of I.G. Farben, and the one on the ITT.
Oh, on Janine?
Yeah, it's about Janine. There's very good books on the ITT,
Yeah, I forgot the name of that one, but I'll look it up. Yeah, I think I've seen it. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks
and I
a
will
lot.
send you any mailings I send to those Nip Tuck and Dave Emery.
Yeah, they're doing a good job up there.
Yeah, I really wish people would get motivated and call some of these, KGO and some. I mean, I realize it was founded by William Casey, Cap Cities, but I wish people would get on the air and talk about these things. I mean, in other localities.
Well, I call all the time. Do you ever hear me call it?
Yeah, yeah, I hear
I
you.
call about every 2 weeks because I don't want to dominate it. You know, I call up about every time. I'm due this week.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. Yes, people could share this information about these various stories with the straight radio. The straight radio is getting very intelligent, as a matter of fact. And I call it the straight radio, the AM radio 375-3082. You can call here. Oh, there's a call. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Mae.
Hello.
Hello. Are you aware that the United Nations released a list of top Nazis?
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, I wish I could go back there and see them. Yes, I am aware. They finally, there's a lot of work to do. There's 30 or 40,000 names, huh?
Well, I don't know how many, but...
yeah, 30 or 40,000. The Wiesenthal Institute is going over them with a fine-tooth comb. Of course, they tell me there's no Fritz Kramer, so I don't know what they're, what terms people make with themselves or with Satan. But at least they're going over names, and some of them have been identified. And Mr. Brunner from Syria is one of the most dangerous. One man that isn't on the list is Heinrich Himmler. There were questions about whether Himmler really died. The body was never found. He was never hung at Nuremberg. He never bit the cyanide pill. Nobody knows if Himmler lived, and certainly his 1,000-year Reich is doing just beautifully, whether he's alive or dead. And Martin Bormann. Bormann is...
Let me let you carry on this.
Yeah,
radio,
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, there's a very good book on Martin Bormann. Yeah, that list is out. And I suggest people read books on Martin Bormann. He allegedly years ago owned Chase Manhattan, which explains a lot if you think of how Chase Manhattan merged with British intelligence, William Stevenson, and is controlled by the Rockefellers. So there's a good book on Bormann, the ITT, the sovereign state of ITT, and the I.G. Farben books are very good, and of course the companion I.G. Farben is Acid Dreams. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, Mae?
Yeah.
As one of the ones who's heard you on the Ray Taliaferro show a number of times, I want to tell you that Ray is off this week. Maybe you already knew that.
Oh,
so
no.
I was just curious as to whether you were going to call, who else you were going
Well,
to call.
believe me, I'd listen before I call.
Oh, sure.
Oh, snore. I usually take till about 1 in the morning and take a bubble bath and turn on Ray and say, well, what's he doing tonight? But it puts me to sleep. When those other guys are on, I just can't stand it.
Yeah, you'd think they were programmed or paid to give the Reagan line or defend him, no matter what's being said.
Oh, well, most of them are. I mean, it is such boredom when those other people, I don't listen to the station unless somebody calls and says, Bill Davis of Christic Institute was on this week on Michael Krasny's, and so I listened for an hour. But it's really hard to listen to those commercials. That's why Kazoo's so great. We don't have any of that commercial stuff, and it's all radio, and, I just can't stand the contrast.
Yeah, I can't either, but once in a while I force myself to listen to see how the rest of the people are saying.
Yeah, well, one in the morning I listen because that's my time. And then sometimes I call him at 4 in the morning. Well, you heard me. Well, if he's off this week, I'm not calling.
Okay. So
I'll be on next week.
Okay, I'll watch for you next week. On this Iran report, you say you watched the whole thing on TV. Did they ever bring up I saw only one article on that last winter about the diversion of some of the money to fund the Republican campaign in 1986.
Well, that's a major thing. That would bring the whole administration down.
Right.
The way they got out of it was that Carl Spitz Channel, who took over Western Goals, copped a plea of guilty with Richard Miller so that they don't have to go to court or have a hearing because they said, we're guilty, it's over. And so that the whole office, a diversion to overthrowing this country and to putting Representative Barnes out of Congress. He's the one that wanted North to be put on the carpet for arming the Contras against the Boland Amendment. And North had memos that said, let's go after Barnes to make a exhibit for the others to see, a showcase. And they did get a woman in Maryland to replace him. if I were him, I'd sure have some kind of a suit, I think, because they targeted him and then he did lose. And they're interfering. They take the money from these people that gave it to them for the Contras and money from profit of the arms that belonged to the United States government, actually, and then chose our elected politicians by getting some probably good people just out and defeating them in the primaries. We don't even know who they are. They never made it to the top.
So they're continuing to cover up this very important...
Oh, absolutely. That's why they pleaded guilty the first day. And so they don't have to have a trial then. They just get a sentencing and we'll never hear.
Okay. Well, I'll finish off by saying that one of the most intriguing mysteries to me these past weeks is what in the world's wrong with your phone board, that every week there's something wrong with it. And you said tonight for the first time what I was wondering is whether it affects the other programs, and you said it does not.
Well, I think the clicking, maybe because we're doing these conspiratorial things, the clicking seems louder.
and certain weeks, the line's busy the whole time. And,
last week's busy the whole time, and several weeks ago I took 2 calls, and then nothing else went through, and nothing changed at the boards. My hand didn't touch anything. Once when I was at KLRB, I was there for 10 years, the station went off the air, and they found that somebody with a .22 had shot a bullet into the tower. Now, how or what that does, or how ingenious you have to be to stand there and just aim at that tower, it worked.
Oh, my goodness.
It really did work, and it was hysterical because the mentality, I'm glad it was just the tower.
Oh.
But they told me, the engineer said, he may be down there and come up while I'm, getting in my car later, but he said, last week it didn't come on at all, that there was this clicking and that they were going to fix it. So I heard there were some problems, so we'll see.
Okay, well, good talking with you. I'll let somebody else on.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we'll just have to take that little click and be glad we can get through. It's 375-3082. Now, I have some articles pertinent to the, on television, seeing people are talking in San Francisco about Michael Aquino in San Francisco. And Geraldo Rivera, I pulled out of my files a few articles I'll share with you. I'll take this call, and in between calls, I'll share some of them. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi. What do you know about the Moscone Harvey Milk Twinkie murders?
There was the anniversary. Was it 11 years this week since they were murdered? There were big demonstrations in San Francisco Sunday night. The anniversary, or Saturday night, rather. What do you mean, what do I know?
Well, was the National Defense Establishment or intelligence agency involved with this?
Well, let's see, how long have you been listening to World Watcher? Just recently, right?
Yes.
Because during those years, I did quite a bit on it. Harvey Milk was, of course, the gay supervisor, and Moscone was close to Jim Jones, and Mayor Moscone had let Dan White off the supervisors. He wanted off because he couldn't make enough money to support his family. Then he said he wanted the job back, and the mayor didn't give it to him. And so he, out of a fit of anger, having gobbled a few Twinkies, went down to the office and killed the 2 of them. I understand he had Harvey Milk down on his hands and knees, shooting him from the rear end, which is, of course, a sexual thing, with Milk having been a homosexual. And there were a lot of keys to similarities to other murders in the terms of mind control. He was in Vietnam. He had served and had some training in this kind of work. He worked with the police department and the fire department, Dan White. And the morning of the murders, his wife was working down at Pier 39. Everything 39 or 19, I forget which it was, 39. And he got a telephone call, and then he put a pistol in his pocket, and his secretary allegedly picked him up and drove him to the city hall. And then he knew that the doors would be checked for weapons coming in, so he conveniently, with gun in hand, climbed through a window on the downstairs that somebody obviously left open for him, because if you have all this security, you don't have windows open. Any security guard would check these windows, and the street levels just don't have them open, and he went right through the window and went upstairs. So after he did the killings, he left and went to Doggy Diner over there on Van Ness and called his wife, and then, of course, they held hands, so it looked like a continuous love affair, which wasn't going anywhere anyway, it turned out. And then he prays at a church to show he's religious. Then he turns himself in to the police department where they give him a telephone in the cell, which is a way to mind control him. If he gets a certain call in the morning, he can be told what to do, and he can also have a different name and act it out. These were experiments done by the intelligence community, described in the book that Candy Jones wrote about her life with the intelligence community, how you get a telephone number and you have an alternate name that you do these various things through. She was Arlene Grant. And then you pick up the phone, they say, you're now Candy Jones, and you no longer remember anything you did in the past 24 hours. So that he couldn't remember anything and got a defense and got off really easily. It was supposed to be death penalty if you kill 2 people in public office, and of course the rest is history. He was right away at Soledad with conjugal visits with his wife, and within a few years he was out. But of course he was expendable because his background or why he did it could never come out. So then he was found with the gas arrangement that he died in his garage, and he was expendable. So that's, it was a hot scene.
How did he get such a light sentence?
Because he was white, he was a devoted Christian, and because he killed a gay supervisor. That's how you get it.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, Mae.
You don't need any more. Okay. Try that. If you are a black man and killed those 2, see if you get that kind of a sense. If you could say, Your Honor, I just happened to eat some Twinkies tonight, and it made me a little bit nervous. So I went down to the city hall where my buddies were and blew them to bits. And they say, oh, those Twinkies that are made by ITT. Incidentally, the bakery, they have a branch, part of ITT, a subsidiary, I believe it's of ITT. Or there's another laboratory, a chemical company that also makes Warner Lambert. It's worse, not ITT, Warner Lambert, the company that hired Otto von Bolschwing when he came into the United States of the Waffen SS. Warner Lambert made the Twinkies. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about this Death's Head organization you mentioned earlier.
The Death's Head?
Yes.
Okay, I will. I guess that's not so gory. It's not the Satan, and I'll bring in a man named Anthony Sutton. Wrote books on the Death's Head called The Order, which is what the Nazis call themselves, the Order, and a Society of the Skull and Bones, also known as the Death's Head. And he's written approximately 20 books. He wrote Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, and he's written books on economy and fascism, and he's an author from the Hoover Institute at Stanford. So if you read the list of his past books, you know that he's no flaming liberal, he's no fanatic one way or the other. He does extensive research, and he's a person who's tried to understand why Wall Street was giving money to Lenin and Stalin at the same time it was building up the arms race and the relationship of these countries to each other to a fascist network. Call it communism, call it fascism or Nazism. And then he started a book in 4 parts and said in the introduction, and I can share it on the air, that nothing at all made sense to him about these things that were happening until he got information about this society at Yale University. And I met somebody who was part of that society, was initiated in it, and it's called the Skull and Crossbones. And they wear their clothing in their ceremonies, the Skull and Bones. And at Yale, they say, are you one of the bones? And it is the Order, or the Order of the Death's Head. That's what Heinrich Himmler called his group, the Order of the Death's Head. Now, one of the initiation features is that they have to dig up the grave of somebody well-known who died a long time ago. And George Bush, I thought it was George Bush, somebody corrected me this weekend and said it was his father, Prescott Bush, dug up the body of Geronimo, the Indian, and brought him in. They have a basement where they keep the skulls, just as Himmler cut up the skull and grave of this person that he idealized as the person he wanted to be. He was reincarnated, so he brought that body to Germany.
Excuse me, Mae?
Yeah.
What was that author's name again?
What's that?
What was the author's name again who wrote about the...
Anthony Sutton.
S-U-T-T-O-N?
Yeah, and I'll make a note here. I'm going to bring information about NutraSweet, and I'll try to bring in the stuff about Yale, okay? And William Buckley is a member of this organization, and George Bush is a member of the organization, and he's part of this secret team. Oops, okay. His phone went off, so we'll take that part off the air. The Order, the book is called The Order, and it's about the network of people who literally control our news media, our corporations, the people behind Hitler, and it came from an early society in Germany, and it's at Yale University. The Skull and Bones, 15 people every year, and those 15 set up front organizations. Henry Luce was a member of Skull and Bones, and Mr. Cowles, C-O-W-L-E-S, who had Look magazine, and William Buckley, and then he sets up Young Americans for Freedom, and it was Buckley's group that brought 29 people from Munich, Germany, to Dallas, Texas, when John Kennedy was killed. They moved in just prior to the assassination, and I did a lot of broadcasts and research on those particular people. Brought from Munich, Germany, part of the William Buckley organization, and he's a member of this order. The title of the book is The Order, Anthony Sutton. And this gives you a better picture of Prescott Bush, the father of George Bush, and he has a son, Prescott Jr., who heads the organization called AmeriCares that funds the Contras, and George and Alexander Haig is on that organization, the AmeriCares, and the late Claire Luce, and many Knights of Malta. They're all Knights of Malta from the Vatican, and they're part of the Skull and Crossbones. Hello, you're on the air.
May, I was going to ask you something, but I can't remember anything right now. I think it's that click.
That's okay. We got to bypass it.
Yeah, that's just driving me crazy.
Well, we can't be crazy.
Yeah, anyway, I just calling to say that I think that when Reagan leaves office, I think there has to be an exorcism of the White House. I think there's just too many dark forces hanging around there right now.
Oh, absolutely. But just see, Carlucci is there.
Oh, yeah.
And Powell is there.
Yeah.
And so, and we have the Secretary of Defense, Carlucci, and Powell. So how do you cleanse it out when you hand it to their heirs?
Yeah, I know, but it looks like we're really dealing with the demonic forces of what man conjures up. It's getting more than just bad politics.
Oh, absolutely.
We've known for a long time, but now it's coming to the surface with the news media. I saw Aquino on television. I swear he looks like a flaming queen.
Oh, yeah. What'd you think of that?
Well, he looks like a flaming queen. You know, I don't want to be
derogatory. Those hands of his and the ring with the scarab. Wasn't he scary?
Oh, yeah. And I can't see that. When I saw that, I said, if the Pentagon and the military is allowing that creep to be walking around freely, we're really messing around with something demonic now. And,
absolutely. The Joint Chiefs and NATO. Last week I saw that and replayed it for people on Thanksgiving. Then the Geraldo Rivera 1 hour, and then I watched the movie twice of Impure Blood. And I'll tell you, my head was really swimming putting these all together, hearing on that news story, you heard it that his mother was engaged to a Waffen-SS?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Well, then, see, I've read a lot about Himmler and the SS and his fascination with mysticism and the occult and his secret order in Westphalia and all this. And I knew that eventually this is going to have to come to the surface. I know that you have to talk about it. It's ugly, and it's the worst. This is the worst part of the whole research.
I think it is.
You know.
Yeah.
There's something we have to face, and I see the way I see it now is it's a battle between good and evil, and a lot of people don't understand what we're really supporting when we go to vote.
Yeah, well, you see, when I have articles going back, this is from the Los Angeles Times and the Dallas Daily News, the Dallas Morning News. It's dated January the 2nd, 1983. Ted Gunderson, retired from the FBI in 1979, is afraid. He fears a plot by the satanic cult on him, and it tells how he was the head of the FBI in Memphis, Dallas, and Los Angeles, and now he's chased by a satanic cult who are involved with murders.
Mm-hmm.
Murdering a pregnant woman and 2 children, and then in order to keep the cover story on that, they want him killed. They're after him so that the murderers, the satanic cult at Fort Bragg, can be free, and the Justice Department is doing it. So that's going not only the Pentagon, to the Justice Department also.
Yeah. Well, I know this maybe to a lot of people, this sounds way off the wall because how does this fit in with politics? But
what do you mean?
I'll tell you something. When I lived in New York City, I was around some very, very wealthy people, and I get the feeling when you have a lot of wealth and you've gotten everything in your life, you've gotten all the material things, you don't need any more. The only thing left
is power.
Is power.
Yeah.
And many of these people were really fascinated with the occult. I couldn't believe it. They gave me the chills.
I know. Well, listen, I thank you. I've got to go now.
All right.
Okay. But I'll be back next week. We'll stop the talk shows now and wind down. I have some headlines here. I'll share the details next week. New York Times, 1980. Body is decapitated in the Bronx, taken from the grave. Another killer confesses to 31 murders involving witchcraft. Another torture of teenager in jail lasted 4 hours. 1982, Mountain Man held. Mystery skeletons found involving the occult. Another convicted killer becomes a judge's pen pal. It had to do with a vampire killer who started writing to a judge to become friends. The ghastly axe-slaying killer involving the satanic. Inside the cult, show business stars among 1,000 members. New York Post, 1976. And Minneapolis Star-Tribune, articles on the Scott families, unhealed wounds, 24 adults charged with molesting the children. 20 of the 26 children were taken from their parents, and most of them got off free. Only one man was charged. I'll just go through some of those and the links of material that I've had in my files through the years. In the meantime, I'm going to take another week of continuing and studying and reading these matters, and sign off at this time and tell you listen to the jazz of Jim Bourne. He's out there waiting to put on your music. This is Mae Brussell, and thank you for the letters and the articles you're sending to me, and I will be back with you next week.